The stench of whiskey and unwashed bodies permeated the air as Marion Porter stood alone on the wooden platform of Silver Creek Depot, tears streaming down her face. The noon sun beat down mercilessly, illuminating the broken latch of her trunk, the only possession she had left in the world. Inside lay the tattered remains of her former life: 3 dresses, a hairbrush, and her mother's Bible. Her so-called fiancé had abandoned her here, taking her money and dignity with him, leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note explaining he'd found better prospects in California. Marion wiped her tears with a handkerchief embroidered with her initials, the last gift from her grandmother before she passed. The depot master had already made it clear she couldn't stay there overnight, and with no money for lodging, she faced the prospect of spending the night outdoors in a town where she knew no one. Silver Creek, Colorado, wasn't known for its hospitality toward lone women in 1876. She attempted once more to lift the broken trunk, but the weight proved too much for her slender frame. The contents spilled onto the dusty platform for the 3rd time that hour, earning sympathetic glances from passers-by who offered no actual assistance. "Looks like you're having a mighty difficult day, miss." The deep voice startled her. Marion turned to find herself facing a tall man with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin. His dark hair peeked out from beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and his eyes, a striking blue that reminded her of summer skies, assessed her predicament with genuine concern. "That's putting it mildly, sir," she replied, trying to maintain composure as she gathered her scattered belongings. He knelt beside her, his movements careful as he collected her spilled items and placed them back in the trunk. "Owen Zachary," he introduced himself, tipping his hat. "Ranch foreman at Silverhorn, just outside town." "Marion Porter," she responded, noting the calluses on his hands as he handed her a folded shawl. This was a man who worked hard for his living. "That trunk's seen better days," he observed, examining the broken hinge and splintered wood. "As have I," Marion replied with more honesty than she'd intended. Owen studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Where are you headed, Miss Porter?" The question brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Nowhere, it seems. I was supposed to meet my fiancé here. We were to be married next week, but he—" Her voice faltered. Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes. "He left you here," he finished for her, not a question but a statement. Marion nodded, unable to speak through the humiliation. Owen's jaw tightened as he looked down the empty tracks, then back to her. "Do you have family you can return to?" "No one. My parents died of fever last winter. I sold everything to come west." He considered this, then glanced at the setting sun. "Night's coming, you can't stay here." "I'm well aware," Marion replied, a flash of indignation breaking through her despair. "But unless you have suggestions for employment that pays with immediate lodging, I fail to see alternatives." Rather than being offended by her tone, a small smile tugged at Owen's lips. "As a matter of fact, I might. Mrs. Sullivan at the Silverhorn needs help with cooking and housekeeping. She's getting on in years, and the ranch hands are complaining about her declining abilities. The owner would likely be grateful for a woman's touch around the place." Hope flickered briefly, then died. "I still can't move my trunk." Owen stood, dusting off his pants. He secured the broken trunk with a length of rope from his pocket, then lifted it effortlessly onto one broad shoulder. With his free hand, he reached out to her. "I'll carry you too," he said simply. Marion stared at his outstretched hand. "I beg your pardon. My horse is hitched outside the general store. You look about ready to collapse, and it's a 5-mile ride to Silverhorn. I'll carry you, both you and your trunk." Something in his steady gaze told Marion she could trust this man, despite every warning she'd ever received about strangers in frontier towns. Perhaps it was desperation, Or perhaps it was the honest concern in his eyes, but she placed her gloved hand in his. "I'm obliged to you, Mr. Zachary." "Owen," he corrected, leading her down the platform steps. "Just Owen." Marion noticed how people nodded respectfully to him as they passed through town. This was a man who commanded respect in Silver Creek. His horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, stood patiently at the hitching post. Owen secured her trunk behind the saddle, then helped her mount before swinging up behind her. The closeness of his body against her back should have scandalized her, but Marion was too exhausted to maintain propriety. As they rode out of town, she found herself leaning back against his solid chest, taking comfort in the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Rest if you need to," Owen said softly near her ear. "You're safe now." For the first time since discovering William's betrayal, Marion believed those words might actually be true. The rhythmic movement of the horse beneath her, and the solid presence of Owen behind her lulled Marion into a half-sleep. She awakened fully when they crested a hill, revealing a sprawling ranch nestled in a valley below. The main house was a substantial two-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around it. Several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn completed the scene. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney, and even from this distance, Marion could make out figures moving about the property. "That's Silverhorn," Owen said, his breath warm against her ear. "Named for the creek that runs through the property, it's one of the largest cattle operations in the territory." "It's magnificent," Marion whispered, taking in the vastness of it. Her family's modest farm in Ohio seemed tiny by comparison. Owen guided the horse down the hill. "The owner, Mr. Harrington, spends most of his time in Denver with his business interests. I run things here with about 15 ranch hands. Mrs. Sullivan keeps house and cooks, though as I mentioned, she's been struggling lately." "And you believe Mr. Harrington would approve of hiring me? A complete stranger. He trusts my judgment," Owen replied with quiet confidence. "And we're desperate enough for decent meals that he'll likely thank me." As they approached the ranch yard, several men looked up from their tasks. Marion felt suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance and the impropriety of arriving with a man she'd just met. What would these people think of her? A stocky older woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression was equally stern as she watched their approach. "That's Mrs. Sullivan," Owen murmured. "Don't let her intimidate you. Her bark is worse than her bite." He dismounted first, then reached up to help Marion down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, stiff from the ride and weak from the day's ordeals. Owen's steady hands caught her elbows, supporting her weight until she regained her balance. "What's this, Zachary?" Mrs. Sullivan called, her sharp eyes taking in Marion's travel-worn appearance. "This is Miss Marion Porter," Owen replied, maintaining a respectful tone despite his obvious authority on the ranch. "She needs work and lodging. I thought she might assist you with the household duties." Mrs. Sullivan approached, her gaze appraising Marion from head to toe. "Can you cook, girl?" Marion straightened her spine. "Yes, madam. I managed my father's household for 5 years before his passing. I can cook, clean, mend, and keep accounts if needed." Something flickered in the older woman's eyes, approval perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. "We'll see about that. I suppose you can have the small room off the kitchen for now. There's a hot meal inside, though I can't promise it's anything special." "Thank you," Marion said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "I'll earn my keep, I promise you." Owen retrieved her trunk from his horse. "I'll bring this to your room." To Mrs. Sullivan, he added, "Miss Porter has had a trying day. Perhaps she could rest before starting her duties." The housekeeper sniffed. "We've all had trying days, but supper still needs serving. She can rest after the men are fed." Before Owen could object, Marion intervened. "That's perfectly reasonable, Mrs. Sullivan. I'd be happy to help with supper immediately." Mrs. Sullivan nodded, then turned and marched back toward the house. Marion followed, aware of Owen's concerned gaze following her. At the door, she paused and looked back at him. "Thank you," she said simply. Knowing the words were inadequate for what he'd done, he tipped his hat. "Welcome to Silverhorn, Miss Porter." The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the scent of beef stew, though Marion quickly noted several ways the meal could be improved. She washed her hands, donned an apron Mrs. Sullivan provided, and set to work preparing cornbread to accompany the stew. The older woman watched with narrowed eyes as Marion deftly mixed ingredients without measuring. "Where did you say you're from?" Mrs. Sullivan asked, breaking the silence. "A small farm near Columbus, Ohio," Marion replied, sliding the cornbread into the oven. "My parents and I grew wheat mostly, though we had a good kitchen garden and some livestock for our own use." "And what brings you all the way to Colorado Territory alone?" Marion hesitated, the shame of William's betrayal still fresh. "I was to meet my fiancé. He'd come west ahead of me to establish himself. But upon my arrival, I discovered his affections had shifted." Mrs. Sullivan's weathered face softened slightly. "Men can be fickle creatures, especially out here where women are scarce. You're better learning that before marriage than after." "Perhaps," Marion agreed, though the words brought little comfort. "Zachary seems to have taken an interest in your welfare," the housekeeper observed, her tone deliberately casual as she stirred the stew. "Mr. Zachary was simply being kind to a stranger in distress," Marion replied, feeling a blush creep up her neck. Mrs. Sullivan made a noncommittal sound. "He's a good man. Too serious sometimes, but reliable. Mr. Harrington wouldn't trust him with this whole operation otherwise." Before their conversation could continue, the back door opened and men began filing in, drawn by the aromas of supper. They stopped short upon seeing Marion, some removing their hats awkwardly, others simply staring in surprise. Owen entered last, freshly washed, his dark hair damp. He cleared his throat loudly. "Boys, this is Miss Porter. She'll be helping Mrs. Sullivan with the household. I expect you all to show her the same respect you'd give your own mothers or sisters." The men nodded, a chorus of "Yes, sir," and "Evening, miss" filling the room. Marion noticed how naturally authority sat on Owen's shoulders, how the men deferred to him without question. "Supper's ready," Mrs. Sullivan announced. "Wash up and sit down." The meal was a chaotic affair compared to Marion's quiet family dinners. 15 hungry cowboys, plus Owen, Mrs. Sullivan, and herself crowded around the long table in the dining room. The men devoured the food with enthusiasm, though several commented appreciatively on the cornbread, asking who had made it. "Miss Porter did," Mrs. Sullivan said, a hint of approval in her voice. "Said she could cook, and it seems she wasn't lying." The compliments that followed made Marion's cheeks warm. She caught Owen watching her from the head of the table, a small smile playing at his lips. When their eyes met, he nodded slightly, as if to say, "You'll do fine here." After supper, the men dispersed to the bunkhouse, leaving Marion and Mrs. Sullivan to clean up. Despite her exhaustion, Marion worked efficiently, showing the older woman her system for organizing kitchen tasks. "You'll sleep in here," Mrs. Sullivan said when they finished, leading her to a small but clean room off the kitchen. Owen had already delivered her trunk. "It's not much, but it's private. The bathing room is through that door, shared with me. The men use the wash house by the bunkhouse." "It's perfect," Marion said sincerely, overcome with gratitude for having a roof over her head and walls around her. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan." Left alone, Marion finally allowed herself to cry not just for William's betrayal, but for the parents she'd lost, the home she'd sold, and the uncertain future that stretched before her. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a dreamless sleep on the narrow bed. The following days established a routine. Marion rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. She learned their names and preferences: taciturn Jake, who loved his eggs over easy; young Teddy, who had an insatiable sweet tooth; Miguel, who appreciated her attempts to add spices to the previously bland ranch fare. Mrs. Sullivan, though initially wary, gradually relinquished more kitchen responsibilities to Marion, focusing instead on the mending and housekeeping she preferred. The arrangement suited them both, and a cautious respect developed between the women. Owen was often absent during the day, overseeing various aspects of the ranch operations. When he was present for meals, he ate quickly and spoke little, though Marion frequently felt his gaze on her. Sometimes their eyes would meet, and he would offer that small, private smile that made her heart beat faster than was proper. A week after her arrival, Marion was kneading bread dough when Owen entered the kitchen, his expression troubled. "Mrs. Sullivan mentioned you can keep accounts," he said without preamble. Marion wiped flour from her hands. "Yes, I managed my father's farm ledgers for years." He placed a leather-bound book on the table. "The ranch books are a mess. Mr. Harrington will be visiting next month, and I need them organized before then." Mrs. Sullivan tried, but numbers aren't her strength. "I'd be happy to help," Marion offered. "I can work on them in the evenings after supper." "I'd be grateful," Owen said, relief evident in his voice. "I can explain our system tonight if you're amenable." That evening, after the kitchen was clean, Owen returned with several more ledgers. They sat at the kitchen table, heads bent close together as he explained the ranch operations: cattle sales, breeding records, supply purchases, and wages. "This is quite extensive," Marion observed, impressed by the scope of the business. "Silverhorn runs 5,000 head of cattle," Owen explained. "It's Mr. Harrington's pride, even if he prefers city life himself." As they worked, Owen gradually revealed pieces of himself. He'd come west from Pennsylvania after the war, seeking open spaces after the claustrophobia of battle. He'd started as a ranch hand and worked his way up to foreman through diligence and an innate understanding of both cattle and men. "And you?" he asked. "What brought you west, besides your former fiancé?" Marion considered the question. "Adventure, perhaps, or escape. After my parents died, the farm felt too full of ghosts. William, my fiancé, painted such vivid pictures of opportunity in the West. I wanted to believe in that fresh start." "Do you regret coming?" Owen's blue eyes were intent on her face. "Not at this moment," she answered honestly, surprised to find it true. Their evening sessions over the ranch accounts became a cherished ritual. Sometimes they worked in companionable silence. Other times, they shared stories of their pasts or discussed books they'd both read. Marion discovered that beneath Owen's stoic exterior lay a thoughtful, well-read mind and a dry sense of humor that delighted her. Mrs. Sullivan watched their growing closeness with knowing eyes, but made no comment beyond an occasional raised eyebrow. The ranch hands, however, were less subtle. Marion overheard them teasing Owen about his sudden interest in bookkeeping, earning themselves extra fence-mending duties for their impertinence. 3 weeks after Marion's arrival, disaster struck. She awoke to shouts and the acrid smell of smoke. Throwing a shawl over her nightdress, she rushed outside to find the barn ablaze, flames leaping skyward in the pre-dawn darkness. The men had formed a bucket brigade from the well to the barn, while others led frightened horses from the inferno. Marion joined Mrs. Sullivan in filling buckets, her arms aching with the effort. Through the chaos, she searched for Owen, finally spotting him emerging from the barn with a young foal in his arms, its mother following close behind. He handed the foal to a ranch hand, then turned back toward the burning structure. "The other horses," he shouted to someone. "There are 3 more in the back stalls." Before anyone could stop him, Owen disappeared back into the smoke-filled barn, Marion's heart seized with terror. "Owen!" She screamed, dropping her bucket. Minutes that felt like hours passed. The roof began to creak ominously. Just as Marion was certain he was lost, Owen staggered out, leading 2 more horses. His face was blackened with soot, his shirt singed. "The last one," someone called. Owen shook his head grimly, collapsing to his knees in exhaustion. Couldn't reach him. A terrible scream came from inside the barn, the death cry of the trapped animal. Marion rushed to Owen's side, helping him move farther from the collapsing building. His breathing was labored, punctuated by harsh coughs. "You need water," she said, guiding him toward the well. She dipped a clean handkerchief in a bucket and gently wiped the soot from his face, revealing an angry red burn along his jawline. "I'm fine," he insisted, but his eyes held something vulnerable as they met hers. Gratitude, perhaps, or something deeper. "You might have been killed," Marion said, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. "It's my responsibility," he replied simply. "Everything here is my responsibility." The sun rose over the smoldering ruins of the barn. 2 horses had been lost, along with feed, tack, and equipment. The men, exhausted but relieved it hadn't been worse, began assessing the damage. Marion insisted on treating Owen's burns and the injuries several other men had sustained. As she applied salve to his jaw, her fingers gentle against his skin, she became acutely aware of their closeness, of the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath his ruined shirt. "I was afraid for you," she admitted softly. Owen's hand caught hers, holding it against his face. "I heard you call my name. It gave me strength to find my way out through the smoke." The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken feelings. Then Mrs. Sullivan called for Marion's help with breakfast, breaking the spell. Owen released her hand and she stepped back, suddenly conscious of her state of undress in only a nightgown and shawl. "You should rest," she told him, professional once more. "No rest today," he replied, rising to his feet. "We need to clear the debris and start rebuilding immediately. The remaining horses need shelter." By midday, a telegram had been sent to Mr. Harrington in Denver, informing him of the fire. His reply came swiftly. He would arrive within the week to assess the damage. The news sent the ranch into a flurry of activity. Beyond clearing the barn ruins, the house needed to be prepared for the owner's visit. Marion worked alongside Mrs. Sullivan, scrubbing and polishing until the main house gleamed. She also continued updating the account books each evening, though Owen was often too busy overseeing the barn clearing to join her. "He works himself too hard," Mrs. Sullivan commented one evening, finding Marion alone with the ledgers. "Always has. Takes everything on his shoulders." "He feels responsible for everyone and everything here," Marion replied, remembering his words after the fire. The older woman nodded. "That's Owen Zachary. Responsible to a fault." She paused, then added, "He's been different since you arrived, lighter somehow." Marion felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure that's not, don't play coy with me, girl," Mrs. Sullivan interrupted, though her tone was kind. "I've seen how you look at each other. Just be careful with him. He's had his share of heartache." Before Marion could inquire further, the housekeeper bid her good night, leaving Marion with questions she dared not ask Owen directly. Mr. Harrington arrived 4 days after the fire, a portly man with a magnificent mustache and an air of confident ownership. Owen met him at the front of the house, and Marion watched from the kitchen window as they spoke, the owner gesturing toward the burnt barn site. At supper, she got her first close look at the ranch owner as she served the special meal she'd prepared. Mr. Harrington barely acknowledged her presence, focused instead on discussing business with Owen. "The ledgers, Zachary," Harrington said between bites of roast beef. "I'll need to review them tonight." "They're ready for you, sir," Owen replied. "Miss Porter has been instrumental in organizing them." Harrington glanced at Marion as she refilled his water glass. "The new kitchen girl. What does she know of ranch accounts?" "Miss Porter managed her family's farm before coming west," Owen explained, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "She has a good head for numbers." "Is that so?" Harrington said, evaluating her with new interest. "Well, bring the books after supper and we'll see." That evening, Marion sat stiffly in Mr. Harrington's temporary office, normally the parlor, as he examined the ledgers. Owen stood nearby, his presence reassuring. "These are remarkably well organized," Harrington finally admitted, looking up at Marion. "Much clearer than previous years. You have a talent, Miss Porter." "Thank you, sir," she replied, relief washing through her. "In fact," he continued, stroking his mustache thoughtfully, "I've been considering hiring a proper bookkeeper for my Denver office. The business is expanding, and I need someone with attention to detail." Owen shifted beside her. "Miss Porter has been a tremendous asset here at Silverhorn as well, sir." "Yes, but good cooks are easier to find than good bookkeepers," Harrington countered. "What do you say, Miss Porter? A position in Denver would surely be more comfortable than ranch life. Better suited to a woman of your capabilities." The offer was unexpected and, objectively, a good one. Denver would offer comforts and opportunities that Silver Creek couldn't match, yet Marion found herself reluctant. "I'm honored by your consideration, Mr. Harrington," she said carefully. "Might I have time to think about it? Of course. I'll be here 3 more days. Let me know your decision before I depart." Dismissed, Marion and Owen walked back to the kitchen in silence. Outside her door, he finally spoke. "Will you accept his offer?" His voice was carefully neutral, but Marion detected tension beneath. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "It's a generous opportunity." Owen nodded, his expression unreadable in the dim corridor. "You deserve opportunities, Marion. Good night." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her confused by his reaction and her own conflicted feelings. The next morning, Marion rose early as usual to prepare breakfast. To her surprise, Owen was already in the kitchen, a cup of coffee before him. "I couldn't sleep," he explained, looking as tired as she'd ever seen him. Marion began gathering ingredients for biscuits, the barn weighing on your mind, among other things. He watched her work, his gaze following her movements. "Harrington's offer is a good one. Denver would be safer for a woman alone." "Are you trying to convince me to take it?" Marion asked, pausing in her task. Owen ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "I'm trying to do what's right. You came west for a new beginning, not to cook for cowboys in a remote ranch." "Perhaps this is my new beginning," she countered. "I've found satisfaction in my work here." "Satisfaction isn't the same as happiness." Marion turned to face him fully. "And what would make me happy in your estimation?" Owen stood, moving closer until barely a foot separated them. "That's what I lay awake wondering. What would make you happy, Marion Porter? Is it a comfortable position in Denver? Is it returning east to rebuild your life there, or could it possibly be?" He trailed off, seeming to lose his nerve. "Could it be what?" Marion prompted, her heart racing. "Could it be here?" he finished quietly. "At Silverhorn, with its endless work and simple ways with its people. Marion stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, with which people in particular Owen. The use of his given name seemed to break something loose in him. "With me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know it's too soon. I know you came here nursing a broken heart, but I find myself thinking of you constantly. Your smile, your intelligence, your strength after everything you've endured. I didn't plan this, Marion. I only meant to offer you shelter for a night or two." Marion felt tears gathering. "And now I can't imagine Silverhorn without you. I can't imagine my life without you in it." The confession hung between them, fragile and momentous. Marion thought of William's abandonment, of the pain she'd carried west with her. But that pain had faded in the weeks at Silverhorn, replaced by something new and tentative, something that flourished in Owen's presence. "I don't want to go to Denver," she whispered, relief washed over his features. "You'll stay, if there's a place for me here." Owen's hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their strength. "There will always be a place for you here, Marion, always." The kitchen door swung open, and they jumped apart as Mrs. Sullivan entered. The housekeeper took in their flushed faces and proximity with a knowing look. "Breakfast won't cook itself," she said dryly, but there was warmth in her eyes as she bustled past them. Owen cleared his throat. "We'll continue this conversation later," Marion nodded, unable to suppress her smile. Later. The day passed in a blur of normal activities, though nothing felt normal to Marion. Each time she encountered Owen at breakfast, when he came in for a midday cup of coffee, at supper something electric passed between them. The promise of later hung in the air, filling her with anticipation. After the evening meal and cleanup, Owen found her on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "It's beautiful here," she said as he joined her at the railing. "I never imagined such vastness when I lived in Ohio." "That's what captured me when I first came west," Owen replied, "the endlessness of it, the sense that you could ride for days and still not reach the horizon." "Is that why you stayed? The open spaces?" He considered the question. "Initially, yes. Then it became about building something lasting. Silverhorn was much smaller when I started here. I've helped it grow, and that gives me pride." "As it should," Marion said, admiring his profile against the darkening sky. "You've created something remarkable." Owen turned to face her. "I told Mr. Harrington I couldn't recommend you for the Denver position." Surprised, she asked, "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm selfish," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Because I want you to stay. Because I believe I could make you happy here if you gave me the chance." Marion's heart swelled. "Are you courting me, Owen Zachary?" "Ineptly, it seems," he replied, taking her hand in his. "I'm not practiced in these matters, but yes, Marion Porter, I am courting you, if you'll permit it." "I believe I will," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Though I should warn you, I came west for a husband once before. It ended badly." Owen's thumb traced patterns on her palm. "I'm not him." "No," Marion agreed, feeling certainty settle in her chest. "You're nothing like him. That's why I trust this feeling." In the gathering dusk, Owen drew her closer. "May I kiss you, Marion?" In answer, she raised her face to his. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss tender but charged with promise. Marion felt something broken inside her begin to heal as she leaned into his embrace. When they parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I'll speak to Mr. Harrington tomorrow about my intentions. He should know you're staying for reasons beyond employment." "What will he say?" "He'll likely congratulate me on my good fortune," Owen replied with a smile, "and remind me not to let my personal happiness interfere with ranch business." Marion laughed softly. "A reasonable concern." They remained on the porch until stars appeared, talking of small dreams and large hopes, beginning to weave their separate stories into a shared future. The following morning, Owen spoke privately with Mr. Harrington. The owner emerged from the meeting with a knowing smile, offering Marion his congratulations and withdrawing his offer of employment in Denver. "Zachary would be lost without you," he told her, winking conspiratorially. "And a happy foreman makes for a productive ranch." Word spread quickly among the ranch hands. At supper, Teddy, the youngest cowboy, presented Marion with a clumsily carved wooden heart. "We all chipped in," he explained, blushing furiously, "to thank you for the good food and to say we're mighty pleased you're staying on permanent like." Marion was touched by the gesture and the chorus of agreement from the other men. She caught Owen watching her from across the room, his eyes filled with pride and something deeper that made her blush. Mrs. Sullivan, for her part, merely sniffed and said, "About time," when Marion confirmed the news to her. But later, the older woman pressed a small parcel into her hands, a handkerchief she'd embroidered with Marion's initials. "Every lady needs a proper hanky," she said gruffly. "Especially one about to be courted by a man who works with cattle all day." The courtship proceeded with a proper restraint that sometimes tested both Marion's and Owen's patience. They took Sunday afternoon rides together, exploring the vast Silverhorn property. Owen showed her his favorite places: a hidden waterfall, a stand of aspen trees that turned golden in autumn, the high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in profusion. During one such ride, 3 months after Marion's arrival at Silverhorn, Owen guided them to a gentle rise overlooking the ranch. The new barn stood completed below, testament to the hard work of the past months. The cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, and smoke rose from the chimney of the main house. "I've been thinking," Owen said as they dismounted to enjoy the view, "about your broken trunk." Marion laughed in surprise. "My trunk? What about it? The day we met, you had nothing but that broken trunk. Do you remember what I said? You said you'd carry me too," Marion replied softly, the memory vivid despite all that had happened since. Owen took her hands in his. "I want to keep carrying you, Marion, through whatever life brings us, through difficult times and joyful ones." He dropped to one knee before her, his expression solemn yet radiant. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears of happiness blurred Marion's vision. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Owen, I'll marry you." He rose and gathered her in his arms, his kiss deeper and more passionate than their previous embraces. When they finally parted, breathless, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small silver ring set with a blue stone. "It was my mother's," he explained, sliding it onto her finger. "The stone reminded me of the Colorado sky, endless and full of possibility, like our future together." "It's beautiful," Marion said, admiring how the sapphire caught the sunlight. "There's something else," Owen said, suddenly looking nervous. "A wedding gift of sorts, if you approve." He led her back to the horses and retrieved a folded document from his saddlebag. Marion opened it, scanning the legal language with confusion until she understood. "This is a deed," she said, looking up at him, "for land adjacent to Silverhorn." Owen nodded. 200 acres that came available. "Mr. Harrington wasn't interested, but I've been saving for years. I thought we might build our own home there." Still closed to the ranch, but ours alone. Overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness, Marion could only nod through her tears. Owen enfolded her in his arms, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I want to give you roots again," he murmured against her hair. "A place that's ours, where we can raise a family if you want that." "I do want that," Marion assured him. "With you." They were married in Silver Creek's small church on a bright October day. Mrs. Sullivan had helped Marion sew a wedding dress from cream-colored fabric ordered from Denver. The ranch hands, scrubbed clean and uncomfortable in their Sunday best, filled the pews alongside townsfolk who'd come to know Marion through her visits for supplies. Mr. Harrington himself came from Denver for the occasion, presenting them with a substantial check as a wedding gift. "For your new home," he said, adding with a wink to Owen, "and for giving me the best foreman in the territory." The celebration continued at Silverhorn, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung between trees. There was music from Miguel's guitar and Teddy's harmonica, dancing that lasted until the stars emerged, and enough food to feed twice their number, prepared in advance by Marion and Mrs. Sullivan. That night, Owen carried his bride across the threshold of their temporary home, his foreman's quarters expanded into a small cabin behind the main house. They would live there while building their permanent home on the adjacent property. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zachary," he said, setting her gently on her feet. Marion smiled up at her husband, still marveling at the change in her fortunes since that desperate day at Silver Creek Depot. "I like the sound of that." Later, as they lay together in the quietness of their marriage bed, Marion traced the scar on Owen's jaw from the barn fire. "I never thought I'd find happiness again after William's betrayal," she confessed. "I thought that was the end of my dreams." Owen caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. It was just the beginning of a better dream. Through the window, Marion could see stars scattered across the vast Colorado sky. "I was so alone that day at the depot. Now I can't imagine being alone again." "You won't be," Owen promised, gathering her close. "Not ever again." Winter came to Silverhorn with snow that transformed the landscape into a glistening wonderland. Construction on their new home had begun but would wait for spring to continue in earnest. Marion didn't mind the delay or the close quarters of their temporary cabin. Each evening, she and Owen would sit before the fire, planning their future home in loving detail. Christmas brought unexpected gifts. Mrs. Sullivan announced her intention to retire to her sister's home in Pueblo come spring, recommending a niece to take her place. And Marion shared her own news with Owen on Christmas Eve. Their family would grow by one before the next winter. The joy in Owen's eyes when she told him made Marion's heart nearly burst with happiness. He knelt before her, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach as if he might hear the tiny life within. "A baby," he whispered, awestruck. "Our baby." "The first of many, I hope," Marion said, running her fingers through his dark hair. "As many as you want," he promised, rising to kiss her. Spring arrived with renewal, everywhere green grass pushing through melting snow, calves being born across the ranch, and progress resuming on the Zachary homestead. Owen insisted Marion rest more as her pregnancy advanced, though she remained active in overseeing the house construction and maintaining the ranch accounts. By summer, their home was nearly complete, a sturdy two-story structure with wide porches and large windows to capture the magnificent views. Marion planted a garden behind the house, determined that their child would grow up with fresh vegetables as she had. In late August, as the first aspens began showing hints of gold, Marion gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth Sullivan Zachary, honoring both Owen's mother and the housekeeper who had become like family to them. Mrs. Sullivan herself returned from Pueblo for the christening, her gruff exterior melting at the sight of the infant named partly for her. "She has your eyes," the older woman told Owen, cradling the baby, "but her mother's determination. Look how she grips my finger." Life settled into a new rhythm centered around Elizabeth's needs. Marion found motherhood both more challenging and more rewarding than she'd anticipated. Owen proved to be a devoted father, often returning from the ranch with tiny treasures for his daughter, a particularly smooth stone, a perfect feather, a wildflower carefully pressed between pages of his notebook. On the anniversary of their meeting, Owen surprised Marion by reappearing with her old broken trunk, now expertly repaired and refinished. "To remember where we started," he explained, running his hand over the polished wood, "and how far we've come." Marion opened it, finding inside a leather-bound journal. "What's this?" "For our story," Owen said. "I thought you might want to write it down someday, for Elizabeth and the brothers and sisters she'll hopefully have." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Marion began writing that very evening, starting with the words, "I was left at the depot with nothing but a broken trunk, until a cowboy said, 'I'll carry you too.' 5 years passed, bringing changes to Silverhorn and the Zachary family. Elizabeth was joined by a brother, James, with Owen's dark hair and Marion's quick smile, and later by another daughter they named Rose, a tiny girl with a mighty spirit. Marion's careful management of their finances allowed them to purchase additional adjacent land, expanding their holdings to rival Silverhorn itself. When Mr. Harrington decided to sell the ranch to focus entirely on his Denver businesses, Owen and Marion, with the backing of a bank that respected their proven success, became the new owners. Silverhorn Zachary Ranch, read the new sign at the entrance to the property. The original ranch house became offices and guest quarters, while the Zachary home remained their private sanctuary. On warm evenings, they still sat together on their porch, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. Owen's arm would rest comfortably around Marion's shoulders, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long familiarity and enduring love. "Did you ever imagine this?" Marion asked one such evening, as 10-year-old Elizabeth helped 5-year-old Rose make a daisy chain, and 7-year-old James practiced his roping skills on a wooden post. "Not specifically," Owen admitted, his voice rich with contentment. "But I knew from the moment I saw you at that depot that you were someone special, someone who would change my life." Marion leaned into his embrace. "You changed mine first. You gave me hope when I had none left. And you gave me a family when I'd resigned myself to solitude," Owen countered, kissing her temple. They had faced challenges over the year's droughts that threatened the cattle, a financial panic that nearly wiped out their savings, the loss of a baby between James and Rose that had left them both grief-stricken for months. But through it all they had carried each other, just as Owen had promised that first day. As twilight deepened into night, Owen called the children in for supper. They came running, full of stories and questions and boundless energy. Marion watched her husband lift Rose onto his shoulders, while Elizabeth recounted her day's adventures, and James proudly displayed a toad he'd caught. This noisy, loving chaos was everything she hadn't known she wanted when she arrived in Colorado a decade ago with nothing but a broken trunk and shattered dreams. From those broken pieces, she and Owen had built something beautiful and enduring: a home, a family, a legacy. Later, with the children asleep and the house quiet around them, Marion and Owen stood at their bedroom window, looking out at the starlit expanse of their land. "I love you, Marion Zachary," Owen said, his arms encircling her from behind. "More with each passing day." Marion turned in his embrace to face the man who had seen value in her when she felt worthless, who had offered strength when she had none left, who had loved her through joy and sorrow with unwavering devotion. "And I love you," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "My cowboy who carried me home,"